Of course, the essence of any creature isn't just to be found in its structural detail and its development, but in its habitats and behavior. Some aspects of snail biology are worthy of separate consideration, and I have devoted space in later chapters to snail courtship, for example, as well as homing activity and a land snail's ability to change its behavior according to local circumstances. One aspect worthy of immediate consideration, however, is movement. Snails are, by definition, slow creatures. Cartoons usually emphasize this feature above all others. To move at a snail's pace is to move very slowly indeed, as those who have visited the World Snail Racing Championship at Conham, Norfolk will know. Conham is to snail racing what Newmarket is to horse racing. The event was the brainchild of Tom Ellis in the early 1960s. Part of the village feat, it proved especially popular amongst local children. It gained momentum in the 1970s when a journalist, Tony Skase, involved the national press. Now over 1,000 children and adults attend each year, and over 200 snails compete over a 13-inch course for a silver tankard stuffed with lettuce leaves. A garden snail called Archie covered the course in 2 minutes and 20 seconds in 1995, according to the Guinness Book of Records. The present snail master, Neil Riseborough, a local farmer who breeds snails, arranges the heats and ensures no one gains an unfair advantage over the damp cotton sheet course. The pent-up energies of the participants are suddenly released when Neil shouts, "Ready, steady, slow." Giant foreign snails aren't allowed, only the English common garden variety. The slow, adhesive progress of the snail relies on slime, another distinguishing feature of the animal. Land snails produce copious amounts of it, glistening, sticky, and sometimes frothy. It lubricates their body movement and forms glue that allows the animal to cling to the underside leaves, sometimes rather than form a continuous trail along the ground. Slime is produced in a series of shining spots. This is because some snails gallop rather than glide, lifting their heads, extending their bodies, and finally bringing their heads back into contact with the ground in a looping movement. Even snails that live in water produce slime. The composition of slime, its viscosity and color can vary. The foot of a land snail, for example, produces watery mucus that changes its physical properties when subjected to pressure. Unstressed, it behaves like a gel. Stressed, it becomes a fluid. Annette Hosoi and her team at Massachusetts Institute of Technology became interested in the role played by mucus in locomotion and devised robotic snails to mimic snail movement. As Professor Hosoi points out, snails can maneuver over a range of complex terrains, even cross ceilings, and yet their movement is mechanically simple. She has been able to demonstrate how undulations of a rubber-coated body moving over a thin film of oil, here substituting for mucus, propel the body forward with waves traveling from front to back. The fluid is pushed backwards and compressed, creating large pressures within it. When the waves are made to pass in the opposite direction from back to front, forward undulating movement is again generated. Many biological systems involve fluid movement within a flexible boundary, not least blood flowing through veins, and her research may produce benefit to man beyond a better understanding of snail locomotion. Slime, when dried, can effectively seal the aperture of a shell and allow the animal to survive drought. Gilbert White, in his journal, describes how the land snail protects itself from dehydration and frost. It throws round the mouth of its shell a thick operculum formed from its own saliva, so that it is perfectly secure and cooked up, as it were, from all inclemencies. Desert snails have thick shells, small aperture, and substantial mucus seals. Others, notably those snails that live in a sea instead of having a seal made of mucus, have a lid or operculum made of the same material as the shell. Its presence or absence conveniently divides snails into two groups: the operculates that respire by means of gills and are dependent on water, and the pulmonates that use their mantle cavity as a lung breathing air, a feature that allows them to live on dry land. Some freshwater snails are operculates and others are pulmonates, since some arose from the sea and others from dry land. Water is lost from the snail's body as a result of exposure to the air, or taken into the body through the skin if the liquid that surrounds it is more dilute than the snail's own body fluids. Moisture is important to all animals, and snails are no exception, since slime offers limited protection against drying out. The shell, being impermeable, offers substantial resistance to water loss, but the animal, unless dormant, still has to emerge to feed and is therefore at risk of either losing water or taking more water on board than it needs. This goes some way to explaining why land snails usually prefer humid conditions, since there is less risk of becoming dehydrated. Slugs likewise prefer a moist environment, but show an even greater ability to withstand water loss from their bodies. Moisture and the living animal are intimately associated with one another. Seeing a dried, often bleached shell makes us think that the animal inside is either absent or dead. This isn't always the case. Snails can survive in suspended animation during periods of unfavorable weather and appear externally dead when in fact they are alive but immobile. The search for the quintessential elements that make up a snail has taken us from persistence in the face of adversity, to spiral shells, to body twists, to microscopic details, and finally to water and slime. Some of its other attributes form the subject matter of later chapters, but those qualities we ourselves project onto the snail are of equal importance in defining the animal. How we imagine the world of the snail and what the snail might be thinking about us forms the subject of the next chapter. Nishiyama Hoen, Snail, early 19th century, ink on paper. Fossil mud snails in considerable numbers. In the Blind Snail Maker program in Richard Dawkins' Climbing Mount Improbable, different snail shells shapes resembling real shells are generated by computer. In this series of drawings of Bornean land snails of the genus Opistostoma, resemblances to instruments from a Hofnagg orchestra are evident. Worm shells from Filippo Buonanni's 1681 Ricreazione dell'Ozio e della Mente. Buonanni's early drawings show how the typical snail shells have undergone decoiling. The precious Wenteltrap, Epitonium scalare, was much coveted by early collectors. In this etching, Buonanni has unwittingly reversed the coiling. In the limpet, the characteristic spiral shell of the snail has been lost and the body whorl expanded at the expense of the spire. In the round-mouthed snail, Pomatias elegans, the eyes are actually at the base of the tentacles. The animal's long, flexible proboscis can be seen. A scanning electron microscope image of a snail's radula showing its rasp-like teeth. Snails approach the finishing line at the World Snail Racing Championship at Congham in Norfolk. The lid or operculum of the snail, Cyclostoma bellari, has itself a spiral motif.